Thank Hello, Dr. Thunder. How you doing?
Hey Ike, how you doing?
Hmm. I'm not doing bad. Thanks for asking. I am not doing
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, and I'm doing all right. My son had a big birthday this past Saturday, and he turned 8. And I've got my this is part of the that was part of the my
Hmm.
wife does all this intricate stuff. Everybody has these bracelets. Everyone has, and you could see too. I still have my CME. I still have my CME uh, joint on. Apparently, I don't like change very much, but yeah, it was a good weekend. And then also, like earlier this week, yesterday, my son had his first cross country practice, and
Nice.
he loves to run. He loves running, um, but he also likes a challenge. And there were a couple different groups he could have ran with. He could have ran with the group that just ran for 10 minutes on stop, just straight for 10 minutes, or a mile and a half. He chose a mile and a half,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is probably the first time he's ever. Well, no, I can tell you for sure it's the only time he's ever ran that far. But he didn't quit. He kept it up, and yeah. So yeah, it's been good. It's a good week so far.
Very, very, very good. And shout out to Blind Guy, his wife, their life. Shout out to SP 123. Ah, new topics. Interesting. Okay, so you see, Dr. Thunder, today we're going to be having a conversation with the people to the degree to which they want to hop on. But we encourage them. We say, hey, open conversation, open panel. Let's talk,
Yes.
ask me anything, the AMA format of the podcast, the good old ask me anything. I always used to think that was like a little like a cheat. Like, it's like, oh, you didn't know you didn't have a show today, did you? And you're just like, oh, I'll do a ask me anything show. Let's keep it real. That's what I think now. But I'm starting to realize that not necessarily so, because it may be the case, as it has been in this show, that we wanted to ask one of the people to ask, but we find it difficult to shoehorn it in. Anyways, but generally speaking,
It's because we have
go ahead.
it's because we have so many great things to say, you know.
Many great,
So it makes it hard. It just makes it hard, you know.
great, great things indeed. Red sings the blues, says sup. Shout out to you, sir. Shout out to you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check out his channel. Blind Guy, his wife, their life is out there dropping a $20 super chat. Check that out to start off early today.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Lead attorney asking a question. Bam. Well, excellent, excellent. Shout out to the lead attorney. Shout out to the lead attorney holding it down out here, growing YouTube channels and starting elementary schools on the YouTube channels while they grow, building it while he flies it. Yes, 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 yes. Putting that rocket engine together while he goes to the moon. The man, the myth, the legend himself, the lead attorney. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to. What do you think about this? I noticed in our conversations, I was going back and looking that we started from sloth, which is like a personal thing. Like, how do I get over my personal kind of deal? And then we moved into negotiation, into overcoming and management. Management, I believe, was the next thing. We went external, and then after we came back internal again, okay, with some hard work things and so on and so forth. And then we go external, either with like the politics or leveraging systems, or what we ended up with recently. So there was a natural dialectic of going external and internal that just
Yep.
happened of its own. We didn't necessarily plan it. And I guess that is
Mhm.
a good demarcation, right? One of the most primary demarcations to make is well, what's inside and what's outside. Uh, so if we go back to the very beginning and sloth, right? Anything to you would like to say about that very first episode, which is about getting over the procrastination, the resistance, the sloth, the apathy, the self sabotage of all kinds, right? The premature ejaculation, right? Whatever, whatever, whatever it may, whichever way it manifests itself, but we know what we mean. Anything to talk about that episode? Because in that episode, we kind of just we elaborated upon this idea of sloth rather than just call it like mere laziness. We knew that kind of covered everything I mentioned, from the mental to the spiritual, if you will, also to just the
Mhm.
mere physical and discipline, right? But any our first episode, overcoming sloth. Any
You
reminiscences?
know, one thing I remember is, and you've said this frequently, this idea that you start with something small, like, you're just moving your finger,
Hmm.
and then you say, okay, let me move more. Okay, now I'm moving my hand, and now I'm moving more of my body. Now I'm doing, before you know it, you're up and moving around. And I think that sort of a little bit at a time, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. That sort of approach to it uh, causes you to be able to focus on very manageable, very small, um, seemingly small, you know, pieces of the problem of getting
Hmm.
yourself up and moving. And then,
Hmm.
before you know it, a little bit more and a little bit more. And though I don't tend to think of momentum as a real thing, um, uh, ab, you know, abstractly, it's a real thing with respect to physics.
Hmm.
I don't think of it as a real thing abstractly because
With respect to the
everything
psyche,
that
you
you,
mean you don't think it's a real thing with respect to the psyche?
yeah. So like
Okay.
if you, uh, it's like this thing. Um, I go to the gym. I was at the gym today, and you know, at any point in my workout, I can just stop and go home.
Hmm.
And it's not like there truly is something that is pushing me on because I merely got started.
Hmm.
I think the getting started is important, and it's almost like the blank page problem when you're
Hmm.
trying to write something new. And once you have something there to work with, it at least gives your mind something to hold on to.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so anyhow, I just
Yeah. You
kudos
think
to
you
you
can stop
for
at any
making that point.
time, therefore, the idea that there's some kind of momentum pushing you. Okay, what if your interlocutor will challenge you and say, hey, there is an aspect, because you said in physics, right? So we leave
Right.
it there. In other words, they're not going to challenge you. They're not going to go beyond the realm of physics. What they're going to say now is the extent to which these realms, which we've artificially constructed, that of physics and that of psyche, the extent to which the realm of physics affects the realm of psyche is great. Even at something as simple as getting that heartbeat up and temperature rise, and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
and all these other kinds of very physical pump-like
So if
analogy.
you're so you're like priming your body, you're getting more blood flowing. Maybe you're um, I don't know. You're
Hormones, oxygen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I suppose there may be something to that. Um, I've not experienced a great deal of benefit of this sort of psychological motivation, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
It
So,
always is
gotcha.
it always is a every action is always a sheer uh, act of will. I mean, it's a job, and I think there's also this idea of 28 days, and you have a routine, and then it becomes easy. You hear people frequently say this, and they'll talk to people, especially that are trying to lose weight, and it gets easy. It gets easy. And we will constantly tell people it gets easier. I don't know that it actually gets easier. I think what actually happens is we become stronger so we can handle how difficult it actually is already.
All right. Would you mind reading what Blind Guy, his wife, their life has for us there in the super chat? Let me give the round of applause one more
Sure.
time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you again. That puts you in the sponsored category. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
Absolutely. Shout out to Ike returning with Dr. Thunder to get things done. Thank you very much.
Shout out to you. So the lead attorney asked a question. This is, after all, Ask Me Anything. This is, after all, reminiscences on the show where we have gone the patterns that have formed of themselves and so on and so forth, and to add, subtract, solidify, summarize, so on and so forth. There's a question down there, Dr. Thunder. Would you mind reading that question for us and the audience, for the benefit of those just listening, sir?
Yeah, this is interesting. Maybe quite fortuitous that we're getting this question right now, because not too long ago, maybe a couple hours ago, I watched an interview, and it was on Tisha Zed's channel, and it was with Rebecca Barrett. And Rebecca Barrett was just on Fresh and Fit on Thursday. And she's sort of she was a feminist, and she's his sort of turned traditional. And so she's talking about submission and all like this. She's recently got married. And she's on the show. She's the only one that is dressed like she's not trying to thirst trap somebody on the panel, and speaking a lot of sense on that panel. But then I saw this interview with Tisha Zed. It's called "Is Marriage Dead or Is There Hope?" Very interesting conversation that I think covered a wide array of aspects of that issue, and why so many folks, so many men have issues. And I've been watching the documentary Divorce Corp, which is what is 2014 or 2015 documentary about the sort of money aspect of the whole divorce thing. So of course, what men tend to say is that the laws are against us, X, Y, and Z. Now, what Tisha is actually saying in this particular interview that I was mentioning before is that you can get married, just don't have the court involved, don't have the state involved in the marriage, right? So just do your ceremony, and you treat each other like you're married. And he says he's from Africa, right? So there's folks out in out in Africa that they never had the state involved in their marriage, but they're still married. And so I thought that was an interesting sort of solution.
All this presupposes a premise, though, which is being asked about, and the premise, which is basically, well, why should you get married in the first place? But
yeah. So yeah. To answer that question, I'd say I believe in every way. Well, first of all, the primary reason for marriage is children. That's always been the case. And the fact is that children will do better with two parents. Okay. And it's too bad I have to say this, but one man and one woman, you're going to get something different from the woman than you get from the man. Something different from the man than you get from the woman. It creates a certain kind of balance. You have certain roles that are established. Teaches the kid about the sort of authority structure. And so I think that's the primary reason. Also, that whole fear of dying alone, that's a real thing. And, we hear
Okay.
KS talk
Okay.
about that frequently, for women in particular.
Mm.
And although there's all of this sort of animus against him, he obviously really cares about what happens to black women. That's why he's putting himself out there that way. And saying some of the things that he's saying. He actually wants to see more black women get married. And he actually
Mhm.
thinks that marriage is a positive thing. I happen to believe it's a positive thing. I'm married. That is going to be the thing for me. And my
This is
parents
a
are still together.
this is a whole topic, a whole scene, a whole space, a whole algorithm, obviously, right? This this question, right? So
Yes.
there's always a danger of getting sucked into that black hole. And before I go to Dr. K Polymath there, and also I believe as the SOBC on the line here to give their thoughts
Hey,
on
brother.
and also questions they may have. Um, I mean, the whole question: is God dead? Is marriage dead? And then what is to be done about it? I think that question is what's being asked here. In other words, I'm relating it to the question of, is God dead? And therefore, is all these kinds of scaffoldings of traditions and so on and so forth, which
Right.
are crumbling now, and what is to be done? Well, basically, it's similar to, let's say you have like the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, right? They're the ones now that can let's say the economy of old is dead. Let's say it's that one we're talking about now. And people have to be more of entrepreneurial. Same thing with the whole God is dead too or marriage is dead, is that people have to become more aware almost. It's the whole red pill premise, right? Is you now
Mhm.
have to become your own philosopher king and understand nature more, because the scaffolding that protects you from having to deal with nature more closely is gone. Simply put, right? Therefore, you're gonna have Gary Vaynerchuk telling you online, oh, how to just go out there and get it and be an entrepreneur. And then you're gonna have a bunch of pretenders acting like they're entrepreneurs or succeeding in marriage, for example. But the majority of people can't really quite figure it out, because majority of people actually do need scaffolding and shepherding and so on and so forth. And it's more of a descriptive landscape, but it's saying, hey, if you think you're the Gary Vaynerchuk or the whatever, then you play according to that. In other words, people are going to have to play according to their strengths now. Again, because we're not depending on externals as much anymore. That's just my addition, not my addition to the thing there, but 100% agree with everything you've said. Dr. Polymath, anything, ask us anything whatsoever. Make it kind of relate to it has related to the idea of the show, and also the space and things we've talked about, generally speaking, over time. Right? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have a couple comments to make here, and then I'll relate it to something that's been said also. So, in terms of like you mentioned the whole economic system, did it die? I mean, things evolve, but the evolution reaches a saturation point, anyways, right? So, like, originally, money was sort of exchanges of goods. It was inefficient, but it was functional for the small sort of exchanges that they were making, and then it became like physical coins, made of different alloys, like gold mixed with whatever it was mixed with, and to dilute it, etc. And then obviously it became the new age stuff that we use, which is paper, which is worth less than gold. Now, the thing is with the whole economic system and how it's changed is that actually there's less people working today than there were 100 years ago. 100 years ago, everyone worked. Everyone, meaning all men, right, had to work and had the opportunity to work. It's just that they didn't get paid a lot. Now, less men work, but you actually have a benefit system. So more people are benefiting, but less people are working. Meaning the next evolution will be that even less people will work. Computers will be taking on majority of the job. Most people will be redundant. Now, if we relate this back to the relationship, it appears it's also a similar thing. Most people are not going to just evolve and become, what you call the philosopher king. In general, that's never going to happen. What will happen, unfortunately, is a lot of us are going to be in pills to be able to sleep at night, and on wine, to sleep at night. And that's
I love the realism, though. Go ahead.
Right. That's what's going to happen. Now, what will also happen is people will set up their own tribes, right? They're going to be naturalists, traditionalists, all these sort of fringe groups are going to pop back up because people are going to realize, hang on, I need people. I don't want to be alone, because the whole point of a family is the kids go out there and they give you a purpose. Like a kid will give a man or a woman a way to be able to go. Parents always say, I sacrificed. No, that's not true. We gave them a reason to actually survive and get through the hardest times in their lives, right? They always mismatch it and make it seem like they sacrificed for us. Yeah, that's true. But really, we help them go through life, and our existence is what gave them that inspiration. So the point here is kids are so important as we get older. Now, my question for you guys is this. As a guy in the modern times with this broken system that we live in, there's two kinds of men here, right? There's a first man who basically is a simp. He simps for females. How he simps is this. A female will say, hey, we're still oppressed. Things are not equal yet. I fear walking late by myself at night. And you ask her, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, you see, I'm smaller, so I'm more likely to be attacked and suffer consequences. So then man 2 says, well, hang on. Statistically, actually, because you're smaller, you're actually less to be attacked, because men are usually quite responsible and attack mostly other men. And very few cases, like less than 20%, would attack a woman. So why is it that you fear? Then man 2, the leader, right, the philosopher king, will say, well, hang on. I know you fear this, but your fear is not warranted on reality. But because you fear it, because you're a different being from me, how do I comfort your fear instead of actually acknowledging her useless point and taking it as if it's serious? What do you think about that second?
Okay, good. So basically, there's a whole kind of really on the ground, granular, how not to be a simp when it comes to emotions, shall we say? Basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then so let's keep that on the. I'll give a quick comment, and then you can take it, Dr. Thunder.
Sure.
And then we'll go to SOBC in the building, I believe. And okay, so the thing for me when it comes to practical dealing with the emotions, because this thing is broader for me than just with, shall we say, relationships with women or so on and so forth. When I say it's broader for me, is that I have to I have to come up with a scheme, a system for dealing with people and their emotions,
Pillsbury,
generally speaking. Go ahead.
You mentioned broader. Do you mean Pillsbury, busted Pillsbury biscuit cans?
Busted Pillsbury can, a busted Pillsbury biscuit can. Shout out to Coach Greg Adam for the obscure reference here. No, not a broader busted Pillsbury biscuit can. Nope. But for me, it's like I have to deal with the idea of emotions, considering other people's feelings and so on and so forth, generally speaking, because my personality is such that it's not something that registers. It's not what I put on my sleeves. It's not what I interact with when I tend to interact with other people. Their emotional heartstring, all that stuff, I'm quite uncomfortable and I'm unskilled with that instrument. However, when it comes to, so generally speaking, it's something that I study, shall we say. Now, when it comes to the not simping, and when she's talking about her feelings and how she's not happy from last Thursday or something and blah, blah, blah. And you may be looking, or I, in this case, may be looking and doing my computer thing, just kind of sorting the argument and saying, oh, or this, or here's that. Maybe I could pop, 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 pop. It is more of a role playing that has to take place at that time. In other words, I drop all that stuff. I drop all that computer analysis, this, that, and the other, picking apart the logic, so on and so forth, because it's not about logic at all. This is not about logic, okay? And also, therefore, timing becomes important. In other words, what's supreme is not what's right. It's about timing is at least superior, right?
Okay, can I ask a question before you finish?
Go ahead.
But, okay, so you mentioned that it's not about logic, but the dangers, and it's happened to me, is that if you don't correct them on the logic, what will happen is they'll have a low resolution idea of factual or rather memory inferences that they're going to actually draw from. Now, they will accuse you of using things from the past, but they will do it readily. And then if it's low resolution, so not quite accurate, they'll use it to tailor their own arguments against you.
You have to stitch across time the logic with which the lesson is being given. You cannot give a lesson in real time. You have to
Mm.
use the series of events to stitch the lessons. It has to be, after all, this is an intimate relationship across time with you and this person, right? So they're gonna
Right.
be,
So then,
you have to,
in a way, experience is also their teacher.
exactly. It's like you wait for certain things to occur. It's like you guys sit down, okay, by the coffee table, okay. Lionel Richie is playing, okay. That's the scene. I don't know why, but it happens to be playing that day on your Spotify, and there's like some kind of an argument that comes up, some kind of a this kind of a feelings thing, okay. And then I do what I said that you should do, which I'm going to go ahead and elaborate more. But to make this point about the time thing, okay, you wait. You don't. You put a flag on that point, and then you wait. And by next Wednesday, some event will happen, which will clearly show, okay, the logic of what you, the rightness or wrongness or whatever, a lesson, right, will be so even blatant that they might be the ones who won't come to you like, oh my God, look at what happened. And then you could just be like, yeah, and this is kind of like the last time, such and such and such, by the coffee table thing. And it's like, and then the person's like, yeah, you're right. So that's what I mean by the role. You have to now take this role, this avuncular role, this role of, now I'm explaining, if I may be so bold as to call it the philosopher king approach here, okay? I'm saying that you're gonna have to take that, rise above, play this role, stitch across time, and so on and so forth. This is the dance that I do. And Dr. Thunder, you got something for Dr. Polymath, and then we'll go to SOPC?
Yeah, the sort of logic versus emotion thing is interesting. It's as if each is the antidote for the other, in a matter of speaking. On that panel that I was talking about on Fresh and Fit, from the Thursday show, there was a woman on the panel, and she's a single mother, and she's a stripper or something, and and anyhow, she says that she used to have the Fresh and Fit podcast banned at her house. That we're not permitted to have it on the show, or I'm sorry, to for it to be played in the house, because they would constantly argue about it. So she didn't want that.
Yeah.
And then she said, one thing she didn't like about it is because they talked stats and facts and stuff like that, and she just wants to hear people's opinions, this kind of thing. So it's very interesting that seems to be across the board a common issue that women have with the way that men tend to argue stuff. In my mind, I like stats in studies and all of that, because it's a way to eliminate an aspect of my own bias, to provide a larger perspective, so that I'm not basing my ideas on purely anecdotal, evidence. So, I don't want to be anecdotal at best.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that for myself there. Okay. But it's interesting that that's like a common issue, in how fear, an initial part of the illustration you used about a woman walking at night or something, and more men are actually assaulted, than women, and all of this. And that's an argument that I've heard on the Fresh and Fit podcast also. But the reason that doesn't communicate is because there's this strong fear component. I mean, if you just imagine yourself, a woman imagines herself walking down a dark alley and seeing some sort of ominous figure that she can't quite make out, with a hoodie on. It doesn't matter what the stats say. It's just I think that the fear component is too much to overcome. So
Okay, let me do some moderation here because we got an hour left in the show and we're just getting this stuff in. However, before we go on that spiral again, SOBC, what you got for us? What can we add to the table here?
Hey, can you hear me?
yes,
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful. How you doing? Long time, long time. It's nice to catch a show today. So to stick to the topic of getting things done, I'm a project manager by profession. I work in IT sector, right? And one of my strengths, both professionally and in life, is that I'm very deliberative in everything I do. And I'm not quick to, just make decisions out of the blue without, thinking through. And in other words, I'm very calculating, and getting when it comes to getting things done. And the downside to that is, especially in the my professional area, the downside to that is, some people might view that as me being, slow or slow to taking action. But it's actually, I think for me, it's the opposite. I just take time to make a decision, and it's not because of fear or anything. That's just the way I operate. And, that's how I get things done. And I do get things done. I have, once I start something, I make sure it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to pick your brain on that, on that
That's a
strength.
fertile. Yeah, that's a fertile area there in terms of the starter versus finisher thing. And perhaps let me ask Dr. Polymath to comment on that. Shall we begin with you commenting on the question that was or what was raised by SOBC?
Yeah, I mean, SOBC sounds like he is in the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. He'll be someone who uses the type of thinking called introverted thinking. So there's two types of thinkers: extroverted thinkers like Ike, and there's introverted thinkers like Dr. Thunder and SOBC. So they'll be more focused on making sure the logic of the event makes sense, meaning, okay, is what I'm actually planning going to reach the outcome that I want? Is the people and the propositions also meeting this end goal? Things have to logically make sense point to point in order for them to sort of feel as though they've covered every area before they can commence. People like Ike are a little bit different. They sort of see more of how can I move things? Whether every single part makes sense, it doesn't matter. Does it move? Yes. Can I get it to do what it wanted to do? Yes or no. So let's say Dr. Thunder will plan a lot more. He'll be a little bit more meticulous in the way that he tries to drive, from one proposition to the next. To some people, these sort of kind of meticulousness might come across as you being slower or even lazy to some people, but it's not. It's a process. And if you don't trust your own process that you've developed over the years and start to adopt other people's process, it's going to actually make you inefficient. So it's sort of like, yeah. So I would say it's mostly your personality type that's going on, and it's something that you've honed all your years. So I would say hone it a little bit more. There are things to obviously worry about compromise, because perception does also impact on whether people are going to trust you with the project. Because if they feel that you won't finish on time, especially if it's like a big client with a deal that they want you to sort of keep it like a rolling contract, then you might have to do a bit of showmanship and be like, yeah, X, Y, Z.
right.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Thunder. I think that was or for first SOBC, any commentary on, just because he mapped it against a psychological typing, and that's what I kind of saw when I said it's fertile ground. Any comments on that? And then Dr. Thunder.
No, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. And there's some times where I have to kind of switch things up, just to avoid that perception of being, looked at as slow or slow to taking action. So sometimes I try to switch it up, or sometimes I'll set expectations with whoever I'm working with and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And this is when I expect it to be completed, or this is when I'll get back to you. So,
Yeah, this is interesting. See, most of my planning is not native. It is a solution for a problem, a solution to a problem. I'm pretty, let's see here. I'm a pretty spontaneous person. Um, but I realize that if other people don't understand the plan, they don't understand what I'm going to do next, it makes them very uncomfortable. It also makes them maybe unable to do their job. So if I'm supposed to be providing certain directives, I can't just simply say, you'll figure it out. I need to have some benchmarks. I need to have some organization. And so I had to start by organizing myself more. And then once I did that, then it was more natural for me to provide organization for the folks that I manage. And
Mhm.
it's interesting too, because there's this sort of misunderstanding of what spontaneous actually means. So spontaneity requires a structure. It requires a structure. So, for instance, I'm a musician. So improvisation is spontaneous composition. When I'm playing, and I have a show on Thursday actually. Um, when I'm performing, I know the forms of the songs very well, and that's why I'm able to be spontaneous over them. So the knowledge of the structure actually facilitates more freedom, more spontaneity. Um,
Let
and
me ask
and
you
of
this,
course
because
it's
I've heard you say
yeah.
this several times, and it just came to mind now. Okay, how about the other kind of spontaneity, where it's, working yourself up into a frenzy, for example, right? So I know the one where you got this map, and for example, when you talk about spontaneity in the structure, even with logic, for example, right? You know, you can kind of dance all through, traverse through the world of ideas and so on and so, but you're following logical patterns, right?
Right.
Somewhat. But you mentioned, okay, knowing the map, and then therefore you can kind of ski whatever, the skate park, so you can do your jumps and whatever. But there is another one where, okay, where you look inward, where uh there's almost you're going for this very, very letting go. Obviously, you have to be well trained too, right? But it's
Right.
similar to working yourself into a frenzy, almost like this whirling dervishes, or you're chanting for 2 hours, and now you're in this zone of just you're watching yourself take action, rather than you you don't even know how you know the territory, or whether you know the territory. Does that kind of make sense? Oh, the map.
Yeah, but I'd still say that on some level, even if it's subconscious, you have some knowledge of what's going on. Like it's not totally and your behaviors will not be random. They will be based
mm,
on your personality. They will be dictated by your personality. So and even the stuff that you like, or the stuff that you say if I roll a dice, and when I roll the dice, um you know maybe for each side of the dice, I'm going to go to a different kind of restaurant that I've never been to. No matter what happens, when I roll the dice, which is random, when I go to the restaurant, the stuff that I'm going to likely select will still be based on whatever my preferences are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So an aspect of the process is random, but really, it only actually shows what your personality is. It only actually there are like these ways to do this sort of randomized composition. For instance, I had there was a guy, Kenny Warner, great piano player and educator. He wrote a book called Effortless Mastery.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great book. Anybody that is an artist should get that book. And he did a workshop when I was working on my undergraduate degree on random composition. So he gave us all of these different ideas and methods by which to get something on the page, to get started, right? And once you got started, then what you would do is you would use your musicianship, strong, a big part of your musicianship, especially with regard to composition, is your personality, your musical preferences, your taste, to craft, to sort of shape the sort of random stuff that you have on the page.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, even though that you started with something that's random, it still is your personality that is shaping what the stuff is. So so there's no way to get away from that. Even if you try to work yourself up into a frenzy, what it is that's going to happen is still going to be somewhat controlled by your personality.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
robots.
It's like the god of wine, Dionysus, right? It was an entity, right? In other words, it's like it wasn't just like randomness. Like, oh, that guy, he comes in, he behaves this way, and has this pattern and this pattern, and this pattern, right? And it was supposed to represent that kind of a frenzy, that kind of a thing, that kind of just going for it, in life, that kind of. But let me relate it back to something else, and then throw it to K Polymath to see if you have any remonstrations against what I talked about, because it relates to this kind of knowing the landscape and then being able to fiddle around with it, because you asked the question about handling emotionally without simping. And then I told you, hey, what you have to do is transtemporal. What you have to do is a role, a dance. It does take mastery, the method that I described. And
Hey,
you may
Ike.
have some pushback against that.
Ike, sorry to cut you off. Is it okay if I can just follow up on Doctor's point?
Sure, go ahead.
So just to make sure I'm tracking what you're saying, Dr. Thunder, are you saying being spontaneous? When you say spontaneous, are you saying some having that ability to adjust to a particular situation? And I think I see that. I also have that other side to myself as well, where I'll be in a given situation where there's no explicit how can I explain it? So for example, yesterday, right, I was in the garden yesterday pulling out, doing some weeding with my son, and we found a dead bird in just laying down there and just laying by the garden. And my wife looked, and the first thing she said was to take it to the trash, and I was like, no, let's bury it, and I think that was the best solution, was to bury that bird underground and not put it in the trash. If we put it in the trash can, it's going to stink up the whole place. Flies are going to, fly over the trash, and, it's just going to stink up the whole place. So does that align to what you're saying? If I was tracking what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you so you have maybe you have a sense of decorum, or you have certain knowledge of problems that may arise given certain actions that has been cultivated. It's stuff that you've learned over time based on other experiences. So that's sort of like learning the terrain. And then the spontaneous act was to have that thought and to do it that way rather than to put it in the garbage. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Polymath, any reactions to what I was saying earlier? I know you were listening and you know where I was saying what I was saying, and take your point up. Dr. Polymath,
You're muted.
you're muted if you're speaking. Or maybe he needs to be muted. Maybe the landlord has showed up and his rent is due and he hasn't paid. However,
that's right. Well, you know that the moratorium is ending, so
winter is coming. Winter got him first.
winter is coming.
Here, live on the stream. Winter, the first victim of winter, got claimed.
Oh, that's great.
So, Dr. Polymath, we're glad to see you back here, alive and well. But go ahead, react to what I said earlier.
Can you reiterate, please?
Basically, after Dr. Thunder, or prior to Dr. Thunder, right? We were talking about dealing with your question, dealing with emotions, right? Not simply, right? But dealing. And then I said that there's a role-playing aspect, transtemporal aspect. It requires mastery and a understanding of the landscape. And the reason why I kind of thought it was a good segue to bring it back there was because Dr. Thunder then had a conversation, right? About this kind of landscape understanding and then being able to kind of dance on top of that kind of a landscape thing. But you may have a pushback. In other words, my answer is one-sided. Obviously, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to be playing the role of something and then letting certain things go. And by the way, no one is perfect in this role either, right? There's sometimes when you're going to slip out of character. Okay. Dr. Thunder knows. Sometimes you might slip out of character for once in a while and you might get angry or something. Yeah, you might, or you start doing the computer thing where you start pointing out logical fallacies and such. It tends not to, and that may be your point. In other words, it may be your point to create friction at that time, which I believe is necessary also, right? It's like, you know what, this is time for some heat. This is time for some energy dissipation. I need to slow down this vehicle, right? I need to rub up against it a little bit. It's going to cause some heat, but it's fine, right? So, you may have some pushback as to this whole general method. It's rather egg-headed, right? It's great for you, me, and Dr. Thunder. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say that this method only really works if you've sort of only really works. This method is more aligned to work successfully if you have the initial parameters good. Like if you're running any simulation, you need to have good initial conditions so that the logic actually expands outwards without too much error, like any code. So the parameters that are important is the person, in this case woman, I guess, is the woman submissive to you in general? Does the woman have a egoic center, so does she have the spirit of Jezebel? Does she feel that she is higher than you or as high as you? If she does, that's already a false start, because what that means is she's going to be doing things which I dislike, which is mixing the facts and emotion. See, if she uses just emotion, that's fine. I can listen, I can learn, I can respond. If she uses just facts, you can also do the same. So, Dr. Thunder can kind of correct her and say, okay, this fact over here, this is the case, this is not the case. But when she comes in and she mixes the two of them, that is chaos, because you can't focus on the logic, and you can't just ignore the stuff that she's saying, because she will be coming at you with, is it impunity or without it? I don't know what that word means, but she'll be coming for you. And the thing is, if you don't put her down in the sense of, correct her, it's just going to keep multiplying. The events are going to multiply across time. Even if you play that game really nicely, it will literally lead to hell for both of you, because egoic people, that's a final parameter, Egoic people just cannot admit when they're wrong. In fact, they dislike the fact that you criticize them. To them, a criticism is simply an attack on their psychological well-being. You are seen as imagine you are an asthmatic person, right? In the same way that your histamine responses go out there without like conscious thought, it just happens, right? When you see pollen, it thinks it's some kind of strong hench Dr. Thundon virus that went to the gym for 5 months straight every day. Is the same way that every time you try to correct an egoic person, it's going to feel that way. So you are literally stuck. You can't correct them. Either you live in hell, right? And then live in your own heaven, in your own making within your own mind. But how sustainable is it to build a castle in your own mind and live up there?
Yeah, you might have a troll in the chat. I think Wallace came in. He said, he says, you know, your pimp hand has to be strong. If your pimp hand isn't strong, you know, it's not her personality, it's not her character.
Well,
okay,
it's not
your hand, you know, you gotta straighten that pimp, you know.
Yeah, I do not recommend any man using his hands on a woman in the Western Hemisphere of the world. It's not right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just in the Western Hemisphere. That's
you recommend
great.
passports.
I like that stipulation there.
Precede hands.
I wanted to say something.
Hold on a second.
Right,
also, we have addressed this. D says something which I don't think I would. I generously thought that you were not doing this, right? But make sure that anyone who is thinking that you are doing what D is suggesting you're doing, make sure that it's clear that you're not doing that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So okay, everyone mixes fact and emotion. Come on now. Okay. This is actually a very technical term. So let's say let's use the fear thing with with going outside, right? Late at night.
Hold on, Mr. Introverted Thinker. Let me just give you some NI here. Okay. You would agree with the proposition that whether you're a man or a woman or you're black or white or whatever, or across your time of your life, we've all done this.
I understand.
Yeah.
Qualcomm
and I think that's the only point, you know.
Yeah, I know.
That's
okay,
don't.
Yeah, she's talking about the qual-quant distinction error, right? It's basically, yes. Yeah, most people do mix fact and emotion. This is true, regardless of their gender. However, it is the case that some people, more likely than not, it is harder for you to dismiss it and to re-explain something to someone and they understand the fact and separate it from the emotion. It tends to be that one gender does it far more often. So actually, your question itself, the
dismiss part is absolutely, I think it's the biggest part there, in the sense that even with, if you could say the dance is constructed, the dance is pure social, a social game. But within the dance between man and woman, it is easier to dismiss a man's mixing up of, you get what I'm saying, right? But
yeah, but
it's not part of the dance to dismiss a woman with the emotion, with her emotions. You're supposed to go towards the damsel in distress. It's all about her distress.
I get that, but there's a finer point here to what she's saying. Actually, it seems it's not that women don't use logic more. It's actually women use a very particular brand of logic. Women are actually better than men in actual logic, pure logic, than men. Men actually
have to do the lawyer thing more. They're more that is their domain. While you're out hunting and stuff, there are lawyers in the home front. And that's what a lot of men get caught. Okay, but they get caught because of it's tactical logic. In other words, anyways,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, women are actually better in logic, right? Because, for example, she just corrected my statement there. She says everyone mixes fact and emotion. That's actually a logical statement. Yes, everyone more or less does that. The thing is, women tend to focus on the absoluteness of the logic and correcting people on that factor, when a man is actually making a quantitative argument. Dr. Thunder explained this earlier, that he's looking at the statistics as a distribution to see how he can interact with it. And then the woman is looking more at the actual relative logic of the particularities as stated. So these actually just pretty much explained what Dr. Thunder was talking about. the woman's interested in more anecdotal aspects. For example, if you look at sociological research, it tends to be that it's mostly anecdotal stuff, right? How did it feel when your husband or wife cheated on you? How did it feel when you were without your siblings? They don't tend to focus on the quant. What makes these kids be homeless? What makes these kids experience alcoholism in such a high number? No, they rather ask you, what made you become an alcoholic? Or, okay, they won't ask it like that, but they want to know the anecdotal, logical arguments as opposed to the quantified, generally, what makes people become alcoholic. They want to know specifically what made you alcoholic. So it's a very different focus. So it's a focus difference rather than anything else.
Yeah, I think of this as being on a, this is like a smart sounding thing that doesn't mean anything. People do often. See if I can make it mean something. It's on a spectrum.
I knew you were going to say that. Go ahead.
So, both men and women are logical and emotional. But if you had to sort of create some sort of chart and figure out how much of what, men are going to tend to be more logical with respect to quantitative things, and women will tend to be more emotional with respect to those things, and vice versa. So,
It's
rather,
you know, you eggheads, you doctors, you and K Polymath, okay.
Well, I'm just saying, when you get in an argument, and it's being asserted that you don't have any feelings, and all you do is just talk logic and stats and stuff like that. Well, that's not actually true. You do have feelings. You're just not
even
using those
the
at the
desire
same
to
level.
be logical is a feeling. Okay, the affront to your feelings when logic is broken is also a feeling.
That's right.
Okay? The vehemence with which you come into the battle to defend logic or not, or state it, blah blah blah, is also a feeling, right? However, you see, and I while I respect that, in other words, going there to demarcate, rather do all that qual quant, what K Polymath calls qual quant distinctions, for me it's just kind of like okay, I know all that, we see all that, like, doesn't matter, and we also know the context within which we're talking about. One of which, as I mentioned before, is also the actual dance that people play socially, whereby one person has certain leeway and the other person does not, because people are the genders vis-a-vis relationship are different. It's supposed to be different vis-a-vis relationship, especially, right? So knowing all this, and to put in K Polymath's terms there, my extroverted thinking is like, okay, we get the puzzle, we get the thing we're talking about here. Let's not get lost inside the particular. It's like, I know you know what I mean when I'm like, okay, I'm going to transtemporally do this, and then that's the way for her to make her feelings, because your idea is her feelings need to be acknowledged because of that dance.
100%.
Was a premise came in, and let's not forget that premise. It's the most important thing.
But there's an issue. There's another issue though, because with a dance, as it sort of within the description is that it requires a leader in that dance, right? The leader allows leeway to the follower of that dance situation. So if you have a situation whereby the leader can't lead, yet the other person wants them to carry them and catch them synchronistically, yet doesn't actually communicate, that's already an issue there. So it's sort of, it's one of those things that whereby if you're going to have to be a leader, you're going to have to actually be given the rights to lead. This is why I mentioned the whole mixing facts and emotion. It means it's hard for you to lead if you are constantly being sort of second guessed by a backseat driver every time you try to actually drive.
Yeah, and every once in a while, it is a pain, right? Because every once in a while, you gotta like, hey, backseat driver, just shut the fuck up, right? And then other times it's a joke. It's kind of like you play a kind of a role, but nobody likes that to be backseat driven and we all know what that is. But
Mhm.
the kind of hiding and playing the baseball of whom exactly is guilty of, like, doesn't matter, because we're painting particular positions and, like, if you're in this position, this is what you have to do. Doesn't matter who did it to you. Could be your gay boyfriend or something. Ain't that right, Kid Polymer?
Yeah, it is an interesting point. I think in this case, Dr. Thaler mentioned about like the guy talking about some African tribes. Actually, most African tribes don't care about so in African tribes, they tend to have a traditional wedding and a so-called white wedding. So the traditional wedding is just where they go there, they get their chiefs and whatever people to sign, basically to do the ceremony, and everyone sees it, witnesses it, and it's a marriage. The white wedding is more of what they consider the stuff where you go sign paper. In fact, I didn't even know that was a real wedding until I sort of came to these lands, to Babylon, right? I actually just thought marriage is, the community acknowledge that you're married and that's it. The paper signing thing, that was weird for me. I actually had to learn that that's how people do it here. Yeah, because marriage is not about the government. That's got nothing to do with it, right? That's a very corrupt form of marriage. Marriage is a commitment that you choose with someone who you think will give you a legacy or a series of legacies. And then you sort of go through life knowing, okay, life is filled with horrors. Life is full of fun. Life is filled with something that cannot be explained, but has to be felt, experienced, and you hold each other's hands metaphysically, metaphorically, and in real. And then that's it. This whole idea of, I'm getting half of the house, giving people this incentives for them to just sort of screw you in the back side. No, it's an interesting concept for me.
So let me a question that is on the screen right now, and also a question to both of you. You seem to agree on what you just said there, but how did you get to that I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, no. I just read the question. It's an interesting one. The thing is, you accept that they are not you, right? If you want to marry someone like you, you can marry a philosopher. You can marry someone like Ike, right? You can go and find someone who thinks like you, but they're not going to give you the same kind of experience where like a woman might give you.
Good, 100%. Let's put a flag in this spot, okay? We're all delusional and crazy when it comes to the things we're attracted to, the things we actually quote unquote fall in love with. Okay. And you say that men and women, it's not the question of one or the other. Okay. We both want ridiculous things that we contradict with the other side of our mind. In other words, we say, for example, right, with one side of my mind, let's say I were blind, but I know this to be true, so I wouldn't say this, but I could say, I would like someone that is kind of logical, thinks about how to handle things out there in the world in a very, shall we say, efficient, effective way, doesn't sweat the small stuff, moves, pop, jocking and jiving, always taking risk and hopping, all those kinds of things. But in reality, that's not what, quote unquote, the heart wants. Okay. That's not what I actually want, right? Because I would like those other kinds of people as a friend, perhaps, right? And so on and so forth. But it doesn't quite do the other thing for me. Now, the key is the other kind of person what I'm actually looking for is someone that is a little bit more, shall we say, on the realm of caring for people's emotions, right? Because I don't, shall we say, caring for fairness, caring for group and all that kind of stuff, right? That's the kind of person that I actually want, even though that thing pisses me off. Okay. I mean, does this make sense, Dr. Thunder? What I'm saying? This is what we don't want a copy of ourselves.
Right. And so this is interesting. So there is in one sense, and maybe this sort of makes my point from earlier, there is sort of a irrational, randomized, like sort of aspect of this attraction thing that you're talking about. In one sense, it seems that way, but I wonder if you did a study on this sort of kinds of characteristics certain
Mhm.
kinds of people choose. I think you would probably find a lot of similarities, and then also with respect to certain biological evolutionary thing, they have that whole, as far as the appearance of a woman, with that whole kind of the certain dimensions that we want to see across their chest and across their hips as being, having a certain kind of symmetry. There's a long, I mean, you look in all the, considered the most beautiful women in the world, they tend to have certain similar kind of characteristics, and that whole thing that Kevin talks about as far as symmetry of the face, and all of that. So, in one sense, maybe there's uh, maybe something we're not controlling, and we're just sort of like going with the feeling. But in the other sense, it's actually very much being controlled, uh, though we're not aware. And then it would tend to lead to the same sorts of uh, conclusions,
Yeah.
the choices that people are going to
Yeah.
tend to make. So
100% agree that you will
I
find
just think
those
that's funny.
patterns, and the only assertion I'm making is that the pattern is going to be such that it's not like you, the person is not like you, and it's going to be not like the thing that you would ordinarily tell people that you like in other people, right?
Right, I get that.
It's yeah, okay.
So you think right, you think you know better than evolution, but actually evolution is going to win.
Exactly, and this is a again, we're stuck in this plane of understanding. I want Dr. Polymath to kind of bring us, because he's the one that's talking about, for example, the selecting of people. I think the selecting of people also bears upon the question that was on the screen earlier. Okay, why stay married to such and such a person, so on and so forth. That selecting part, which is key, even whether you're playing the Philosopher King dance or you're just trying to play some other dance, right? The fact that the people participating in this dance have to be of wholesome quality, minimum threshold, right, of certain things, is key here. Can you demarcate some of these things? Is IQ? Should we give them IQ tests?
Right. Yeah, the brother mentioned someone who's extremely disingenuous, and I forgot the other words that he used, but more or less saying someone who is unreasonable and disingenuous and will argue against you without actually having a point that's accurate. Well, the first step here for this point is, well, you don't want someone who is lacking in some parts. For example, if you want someone who's like that, as long as they're submissive, then it's fine. Because what that means is they will still trust your decision at the end of the day, and they will say how they feel, but they'll still trust you to run the company. So they will tell you, I don't like it how you don't pay enough Mike and Ellen from X, Y, and Z, right? You'll think about it. Sometimes you will actually increase their pay. Most of the time you won't. But guess what? She still trusts you to be in charge of the company, and she's not going to complain about how you run the company. That's okay. So you
talking about her comic book anime store which she runs with her husband.
Exactly.
And sometimes her husband will make a decision and then she might cry about it. Right? She was being interviewed by Bernard Riley. That she might cry about it that night. But then the next, she's fine that he's made a decision, blah, 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 that kind of a thing. And I think that aspect, okay, so Queen Q we're using as a shining example, like, wow, that's what you're looking for, right? And she kind of gave all the signs to my intuition that she was that kind of a person. But generally speaking, I think that this is something that a man need to learn about the opposite sex in general, is that sometimes she you know what, she has to cry that night, but the next day is going to come. It goes with my whole trans-temporal weaving thing. Right. You cannot get it that kind of logical closure instance by instance. No.
Generally for women, they don't caring so much about whether they were right or wrong necessarily. What they care about is the fairness of interaction. So did they feel heard during that argument? That is more important to them than whether even they won the argument or whether you won the argument. Did they feel that you did not attack them? Did they feel that they had a way to express themselves? If they have all these things, even if they cried, the next day they will still go on because they felt that the environment is fair. this is why many of the HR are women, because they're valuing more of the experience across time rather than the particularities of the statements made, or who was right or who is wrong. They don't care about the nitty-gritty of how the company runs. They care about the experience of the workers in the company. So if you keep the general experience of the workers well, guess what? They're not going to be leaving and you churning out new recruits and training new people. They're going to generally stay. They'll complain.
When it comes to selection, okay, since we've kind of demarcated this thing, I think very well that we kind of pinned it down that everybody can see. Okay, when it comes to selection, this is the main thing that this kind of transtemporal behavior is what I check. Okay, there are a number of checks that I just kind of developed intuitively over the years, right? Because again, as I said, for me, this whole kind of interfacing with people thing is very much a problem to be solved, right? For my entire life, right? So, when I interact, with someone is like, a woman, intimate relationship, possible, blah, blah. And I tend to, generally speaking, anyways, go into my preferences, but I want to test that they are able
No.
to
Please share your preferences.
Yes, please. Let's stop there. This is Ask Me Anything. We got you now. Let's talk about your preferences. Anyways, so
I taxed them with an extra leg.
Oh, wow. That's not right. That's not right. Our trip to the Philippines was supposed to stay in the Philippines with regards to extra legs and such. Now, when you see that this woman is able to, over time, weave together a narrative with you.
You say weave? Is she a black woman?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. With the weave, the weave happens.
Okay.
But anyways, you're out there taking shots out from the dark.
Next will be the snow bunny and pump and dump jokes.
Exactly. This is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Okay. So, over time, okay, and if I were, there's a way of kind of presenting this in a more granular and logical way. I'm just going to use patterns here, right? Over time, I'm going to notice that they're able to weave across time with me these patterns of story with lessons in them. Okay, lessons about how we have learned about each other and how we interact. That is 100% necessary. Otherwise, it's a no-go for me. You get what I'm saying, right? In other words, over time, okay, good, yeah, we did this, and you have to let it breathe. You have to let that thing do its thing. And I always watch that with people, right? It's not about how the whole. They're also more, shall we say, granular, real-time, short period, if you will, high frequency type things that I'm checking. But over time, with the longer periods, with the lower frequency type things, I'm also checking that as well. So I know that makes sense to you eggheads.
Yeah. So a couple of things I thought were interesting. So I don't actually think that, at least in my interactions, relationships with women, that I don't know that I would say fairness. I think they do want to be here, want to feel as though they've been heard. But I have found that I'm the one that tends to advocate for fairness, because there seems to be a lack of, and maybe this is a contradiction in terms. The other thing I was going to say, and this is a bit of a digression. IQ said something about people acting out of their character, doing something that was out of their character. I would argue that I don't know that you can do something that's out of your character.
I don't know. Did I make a? I don't remember kind of dying on it, if that hill, or was that a?
No, you didn't die. You didn't die on the hill, but I wanted to make a distinction. Since it's ask anything day.
Okay.
I don't know that you can. Okay, but this is a nuance, but it's a common expression. Someone acting out of their character or doing something that's out of their character. I would argue that you can't actually do something out of your character However, the intensity of circumstances can reveal things in your character that maybe you weren't aware of.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So anyhow,
100%.
again,
100%.
that's just a tweet.
Yeah, that's a good thing that you said. You wanted to bring it out, and if I were to state my position, that I'm actually quite deterministic in that regard. I'm very like, hey, if something's gonna happen in Miami, if something something bad is gonna happen in Miami, stay out of Florida, that kind of thing, because I don't think you could trust yourself very well, or it's kind of it's like tempting the Lord. Is not good. You can't trust yourself because it's kind of like a chemistry experiment. I feel like if I put you in the right energetic state in Miami at the right strip club and so on and so forth, the bad things which are supposed to keep you out of Miami, there's a high likelihood that it'll happen, right? In other words, right blood alcohol, right temperature, right snow bunny, everything just right. Trust me.
Right,
okay?
pump and dump scenario. Yeah.
Just and so I like the determinism in that way.
This
I
is
think I should
Pillsbury.
it's not a busted Pillsbury biscuit can. This is a I'm not gonna. He prefers the community college.
Mrs. Pillsbury, the snow woman.
So, Mr. Wallace, okay, you're gonna give us something. You are gonna give us something to close, and then we'll have our wrapping thoughts. And this was a great episode, which we kind of traversed many things. And Wallace, what you got for us? Were you trolling earlier, Dr. K Polymath?
It's a pleasure to be here. Good night, everyone. Good night, Polymath. Good night, Dr. Thunder. Good night, Ike. It was a great show. I was laughing a lot. So I just came here to say hi, and it was a pleasure to be here, to be listening to you guys. You made me laugh a lot. You made me have double smile backflips. So thank you for that. And I just came here to roar. And it's basically that. Thank you.
All right, he's a freaking stand-up comedian over
here. That was
it's
another
like,
CGA reference.
Yep. Oh, yeah. It's like I don't know if I want you roaring around me, but we can.
Right.
I'm open-minded.
I want to succeed in life. Okay. I will succeed.
All right, Wallace. All right, Wallace. I wish you much success with your.
Yeah, Wallace, I think you got this wrong. This is not junior college.
I don't have the angelic sound on here.
Okay. So, a question by Blind Guy, and thank you very much, Wallace. Thank you for the levity at the end here. And a question by Blind Guy that was brought up earlier regarding the stories. Okay, and this is to get into my Jordan Peterson, and I'll let you, Dr. Thunder, kind of speak on it, and then K Polymath. Okay, let's wrap it up with this. There's the whole idea of, are the stories real? And again, I'm that a Mr. Intuitive guy where I'm just kind of like, it's not about the intuitive, it's more of the extroverted thinking, where it's like, I'm just looking for the shape of the thing and how it works. That question of, is it real? Always I just kind of slap my head and like, these people with their real versus not real, like what is real? Like, the atoms, the thing, and like, anyways, and I get it. No, I'm in some sense just as much of a physicalist as the rest of us here, and so on and so forth. But this idea of what is real and what is not, when it comes to utility and evolution and all these kinds of things, and even spiritual things and consciousness, seems to be. Anyways, I'm stating my point there as a Jordan Petersonian pragmatist when it comes to most of these things, and then trying to find the realness is just to say it is all real. And then I'll pass it on to you, K Polymath, and you ended, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah, actually, this is an interesting one. Nothing is so-called real as we want it to be, in a sense, because the only thing that's real is logic, right? Relationships between objects or people, in the sense that, the computer is real in the sense that it works on a computer code. That's as real as you get. Everything else that exists is actually not real the way that you want it. Everything is embedded in webs of stories. So let's use a simple example, science, right?
All right, Plato, go ahead.
People think that science is real and then religion is false, right? Let me make it clear that both of them are built on a series of unprovable claims. The first law of thermodynamics: energy cannot be created or destroyed. How do we know that? We don't know
You
it.
smuggled it in. That's Jesus smuggling. The first law of
Exactly.
thermodynamics is Jesus smuggling, ladies and gentlemen.
We made it up, guys. Now experiments show that this is the case, but how can you make an experiment that you can test, right, to prove your idea and then say that that's the absolute truth out there? No, it's not. It's a belief. And the rest of the thermodynamics laws are all beliefs, right? The thing with life is that we all have cultures, beliefs, and the stories that we kind of take and uphold. Choose your best fairy tale. Some fairy tales are more true than others, I guess, and they can sort of have that kind of demonstrable fact that are applicable to your life. But ultimately, they're all fairy tales. Science itself is the greatest fairy tale right now that's taking over people's minds. Science cannot be proven at the axiom, the beginning framework. So it's all.
You always run into the incompleteness thing, regardless of which realm you're in, when you get it to the axiomatic stage of things, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like you cannot. There's some things you cannot prove. The only thing you can prove is, hey, I exist, or this version of me, whatever that means, exists, right? You could be an electron in a cube stuck within my ears, right? Maybe that's what D is. Who knows? But it's irrelevant because D is still D. And D can live and experience whatever she wants to, and she should choose the experience that allows her to best grow, heal, and be the best version of herself.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of apples and oranges, right? It has to do with the purpose of what it is that we're talking about. Is something useful to its purpose? Science has a particular purpose that does not, in religion, has a particular purpose. I don't think that they both need to satisfy the same thing. And I think that tends to be that's a regular mistake, I believe, that atheists make when they are sort of talking about religion and using science as some sort of better solution. Well, I don't think science solves the problems that religions does, and I don't think that religion solves the problems that science does. And D made a comment in here saying that the Bible's not peer reviewed, which I thought was
it's actually
funny.
it's actually quite peer. It's a quite peer reviewed document, for their system, right?
It actually is, and that was going to be what I was going to say. And there is such a thing as a canon of Scripture, and in councils that were convened to make those make those decisions.
Yeah.
So, but that is rather funny.
It also didn't Paul basically, let's say, whenever isn't the New Testament basically a rewriting of the old with new interpretation added onto it and new experiences? And Paul's basically peer reviewing a lot of what was written. John, the Revelation, basically it's all peer reviewed, actually.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and we know you're being funny, D, but it's also a very good point that you make. So
if I
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to plug something or a couple things, if you don't mind. So I have a live stream coming up tomorrow, and that's tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on Thunder's Thoughts, that's on my channel. Me and Dr. Doug are going to talk on the topic from PUA to Orthodox Christian. We're going to do two video breakdowns. One of them is of an interview that it's a year and change old that JLP did with Roosh V, and then the other one is a little clip from a call-in show that King Riches had, where you get to see a lot of hamstering from the from the caller, which is very sort of interesting. So that's going to be a cool show. And then on Thursday, I have my monthly Dr. Thunder Quartet live stream. That'll be streamed to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. And yeah, so that's going to happen. That's a 7 to 9 also. Both of those are 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. Please come by and support the show. There'll be ways that you can support the show. You can tip the band, all of that stuff. And we appreciate the support thus far. Please keep coming back. Going to have a few different selections this time for the show, and it's going to be some great music. So thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So let's wrap this up. I think this was a good one, Dr. Thunder. This was a good build, as some people would like to say. I don't know what you mean by build. But, ladies and gentlemen, one of the first things that I noted with regards to the conversations of getting ish done is that there's an internal and an external demarcation. We started out with sloth and things like that, which are about getting yourself ready. And then we went out into the world where we negotiated. We came back in to prepare ourselves when it comes to certain kinds of skills, if you will. And then you go out and you play politics as well. We talk about how people influence you, right? They may inspire you, teach you, so on and so forth, and how to get rid of haters. We're going in and out, in and out, in and out. And then we ended up this conversation talking about the fact that science removes and it is its strength and its purpose to remove the subjective. It is to be objective, right? And then that which is primarily centered around the subjective and the spiritual is just it's a different thing altogether. And and in that plane, in that subjective plane of the spiritual and so on and so forth, and subjective there not meaning whatever you want it to be, but following from the logic that I just said, right? In that realm, okay, people are in very, very different places, okay? And that's why, I shall we say, I can commiserate with Jordan Peterson and his whole people asking him about God stuff. Because people are not even speaking the same language in that realm. They're not even living in the same universe sometimes in that realm. When people say things like, "Do you believe in God?" Like they might not even, what's a shaman who does ayahuasca, okay, to give versus this other, shall we say, straight edge Mormon in what is spiritual to them both, and if we put the shaman in his original context, prior to whatever in the jungle over there in Ecuador, right? And these are human beings, and people up to today differ in that regard with regards to that whole spiritual thing and the answers that they will give. That's why it's very key to kind of clarify what you mean, or not to just be quick to answer those questions. But thank you very much, everybody, for contributions, for the questions. Thank you, Blind Guy, his wife, their life. Thank you, D. Thank you, Jared, and all the moderators out there. This was Getting Ish Done with Dr. Thunder. Okay. And thank you for the guests. Thank you for SOBC, for K Polymath. And then someone else came in, but before I was able to add them, they dropped out. And I think that this is a good one for the books, where we off-gassed and entropied some of the ideas that undergird some of the more practical things that we've been talking about in this channel, where we allowed ourselves to get a little bit more philosophical, if you will. So with that, I think we're going to go out. Let me give him a little splash at the end. Peace.